It's the LIA Cast, a show where a couple visual storytellers get together, take a walk around a topic, try to look at it from some kind of like thoughtful, introspective point of view. Be a little bit abstract about it, but then we don't want to leave you just with a bunch of like useless thoughts. We try to take it on in a more practical way, give you some kind of like ways to put all this thinking into action. Because after all, we think hard about visual storytelling, so you will too. My name is Jersey Droz, cartoonist and teaching artist. The other host is.
Hey, I'm Rob Stenzinger. I'm a designer, sketcher, coder. And with us, we have a guest today.
Returning to the
Kohl
show.
Glass. Yeah, returning.
Hello.
Welcome, Kohl.
Well, thank you, guys. Thanks so much for letting me come back on.
Kohl Glass, one of my favorite thinkers in storytelling, a writer and director whose work you can find at Eventide Creative. Let me pull up Actually, I've got your Vimeo channel here.
That's a good one. That's got everything I try to put.
That's it. You can just search for Eventide Creative on Vimeo, but we'll link to it in the show notes too at leanitoart.com. Also, Kohl Glass on Twitter, Kohl Glass. You tweet very funny things.
Yeah.
Yeah. You tweet like dialogue tests. So sometimes It's kind of interesting to see like, is he really saying that, or is he testing out dialogue for a potential story?
It's true. It's not even testing. It's more like storing.
So you just go back to your Twitter feed and be like, okay, what did I write this week?
Like I need a good line. Maybe I tweeted something about that.
In retrospect, take it to the limit is a pretty tame phrase. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then also we said you're a writer and director. So we should point out your claim to fame. One of your claims to fame, as you pointed out on Facebook, is that film that you did in 2013 called Orc Wars, now called Dragonfire, right?
Mm-hmm.
A pirated edition of this film has been viewed on YouTube 8.5 million times.
Yeah, I think we broke 9, and we might be heading towards 10 pretty fast.
Good Lord! So
Whoa.
Okay, people are gonna be wondering, what is this Orc Wars thing? Why is it so big on the YouTubes? Is it you playing video games and swearing at the screen, or what?
No, it's I made this movie called Orc Wars, and it's about orcs coming to our world, and a special forces guy has to deal with them with a machine gun. And when we make these movies, the main like most movies, they make a lot of their money back in foreign sales, and but foreign countries have less strict copyright laws than ours do, and as soon as they sell them to the foreign markets, they get put up on torrents and stuff like that pretty fast. And so this one was from has Arabic subtitles on it, so it was probably an Arabic area, and like before we caught it. It already had like a couple million views, and the producers were like, "Well, look at that. Let's see how high it can go." So we're just watching it go up, sitting there thinking, if we had $1 from every person who watched this,
that would bankroll the next movie.
It could bankroll 5 of those movies, but yes.
And we should say, like, this is no small production, Orc Wars or Dragonfire. I mean, there's a dragon in this movie.
Right. Yeah. It was low budget, but it wasn't micro budget.
Yeah, it looks great. I mean, and the premise is basically, I think you've described it in the past shows as like the Chronicles of Narnia in reverse, where there's a dude just trying to mind his own business here on Earth, and then a portal is open, and the monsters from the fantasy world come into our world.
Right.
And there's this like lineage of people who have protected this portal at different times in history, and it's this poor well-trained dude's duty to take on responsibility of the portal from now on, right?
Right.
But you also just wrapped up production on a new film.
That's right.
A new feature, right?
That's right. I just did it was a thriller actually this time called The Stepsister, and it was I don't know how to explain it. It's a thriller called The Stepsister. You could probably guess a lot about that, knowing those two things about that movie.
So are you saying it's a scary story?
Yeah, we try. I mean, well, I don't. Okay, so I don't want to say that it was made for Lifetime, but it was made for Lifetime. Um, like it was designed for Lifetime. I don't know.
What kind of
I don't,
code
I
is
mean,
that?
hopefully this doesn't come back and bite me. But we've since decided to kind of do a festival run with it first, before they try to sell it to Lifetime. So it was. I mean, it's very much a Lifetime thriller. And a Lifetime thriller, I think you can define as three things: very female centric, a thriller, right? Like a kind of. I think the Lifetime thriller is the next generation of like the '90s thriller. Like in the '90s, you look at the genres of the '90s, popular genres, and like thrillers were like huge,
Mm.
And I think they all went to go live with Lifetime, maybe, I don't know. And then the last one is it's made for TV, right? So it's not, it's not like rated R. It's everything's kind of curbed. So yes, within that parameter, yes, we tried to make some scenes scary. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're going to talk about this in great detail because that's the topic for this week is talking about scary stories. It's that time of year, right? Like there's something about late October at the time we're streaming this live where we get, a lot of us, not all of us, but a lot of us get kind of excited about the notion of willingly submitting ourselves to being frightened in one way or another, or celebrating things that are unnerving or spooky or creepy. And we'll navigate all that today with Kohl, who I know has tons of thoughts on this topic of like what makes a story scary and how do you navigate that? How do you use how do you use this kind of thinking to construct your own scary stories or create scenes in your stories that are scary? But there's one more thing that I cannot overlook as we talk about your participation in this discussion, Kohl, as a preface, is that you are also an enormous Batman fan to the point where I think you said on one of the shows, you were on an episode of the Comics Are Great show with me called What's So Great About Batman. And I think you said, like, you can't, what was it, like, you aren't human if you don't love Batman?
Right. Like he's the human on the team, so he's got home team advantage. You should be rooting for him
Right.
over, like anyone else. But yeah, I'm always pleased to be labeled as a Batman fan because I spent a lot of time thinking about it.
And we've talked at length in the past about Batman and why he's so great. So, and while I'm more Team Superman myself, I do agree with everything you said about Batman.
Yeah.
In the past.
No, and you can love both, and you can love Marvel, and you can love everything, but I think Batman is very hard to dismiss.
I had a student in one of my classes not long ago, and this young man is like preteen. And so he said the thing that we've heard before, and we may have said ourselves at one point or another, where it's like, I got this great idea for my own Batman story. My Batman story kills people. And like he has like this little twinkle in his eye, like, yeah, I cracked the code, And I'm like, all right, well, sell me on it. Sell me on this notion. I just have to hear what Kohl Glass would say in that classroom moment with the kid that says that.
Oh, I don't know. Usually, we've seen certain Batmans kill before. Usually they're not Bruce Wayne, but we've seen a killing Batman.
When?
So I wouldn't just totally dismiss him, but I also would say you need to look at, like, if you were like gonna try to tell this story in, like not just like, oh, I think this will be cool Elseworlds, but like this is a Batman story that I would like to fit. You really have to look at like the kernel of the character. Like I remember reading, I can't remember his name, but he wrote, I'm not going to be able to say his name, Brian
Azzarello?
Yeah. So he wrote The Joker. And I read that and it was disturbing. And I remember reading a review saying like, I don't recognize this character as the Joker. This is a psychopath, right? Like this guy's like, another serial killer, but not the Joker. And I thought a lot about that, about how like there's core elements, and if you can still tell a Batman story where he kills, but you still are like people recognize him as Batman, then that's okay. but you got to make sure. But like not killing is such a huge part of Batman that it's hard to just go around that. You know what I'm saying? But I'm not saying there's not a way around it.
Because characters like Batman show us that heroes always find a way. So.
Heroes always find a way, and Batman finds a way, and
maybe you could find a way to make Batman kill somebody.
That's
a strange way to end on an uplifting note about Batman killing people, but okay.
Yeah, the thing I want the most is I want to feel I recognize Batman. There's a lot of Batman stories you read, and you're like, this doesn't feel like Batman. But everyone has their own Batman. That's what we talked about.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like Jesus. Like everyone has their own Jesus.
That's
and my Jesus wouldn't do this, and your Jesus would.
Yeah.
And until we meet Jesus, we don't know. And until we meet Batman, we don't know. We only just have our own ideas of Batman.
Right. Okay. Well, and so this will all be information that will help, contextualize our exploration of, talking about scary stories. But before we go into that, before we move any further, Rob, do you want to take over the next section, the ad spot?
Yeah, sure. So, this show is sponsored by, at the moment, us, where we have some interesting projects that are worth checking out. For instance, Jersey has this excellent comic about a bear and a bird going on adventures, righting the wrongs that need righting, called Boulder and Fleet. And you can check it all out at boulderandfleet.com. And as you build love for this, because I know you will, you'll want to go to check out Jersey's Patreon page and products page to purchase your own copies, physical copies of some Boulder and Fleet related comics and a Boulder and Fleet mini comic. And they are easily accessible from a link on the right of the page at boulderandfleet.com. Jersey's Patreon is an excellent way to help say, yeah, I want to see this thing keep going. It's awesome. Just keep feeding me those comics, Jersey. And that is at patreon.com/Jersey. And if you are super stoked to do some more supporting of Lean Into Art, you can always go to leanintoart, or you can always go to patreon.com/leanintoart to support this show's Patreon page as well. And finally, you can go to this-panda.com if you have a young person in your life with an iPad that needs some entertainment and fun and learning some pattern recognition and enjoyment of some basic physics, stacking shapes with the game This Panda Needs You, which is at this-panda.com. Now available for iPad. And finally, if you are thinking, wait a minute, I want to support this show. I have a product I think these guys will believe in. You want it to go to leanintoart.com/advertise. And let's talk about it.
Cool. Thanks, Rob. All right, so let's go 10,000 feet up. Oh, I should play the music. Let's play some music so we can go 10,000 feet up, talk about the topic in abstract, look at it from every conceivable angle, look for the hidden dimensions and depths, see what we can pull out, tease out of this topic. Like, what makes a story scary? How do you make scary stories? But first, what do we mean? Like, this is language. This is a language thing, guys. When I say, because when I was writing up the notes for this, I originally started with the title Spooky Stories with Kohl Glass, and I thought, and that was my first clue. It was like, spooky, that's a lot different than scary, isn't it? And then that got my mind going, like, okay, well, what's the difference between spooky, creepy, disturbing, frightening, terrifying, haunting? I wonder if we could pick at that as a jumping off block into this topic. Like, do you guys have strong thoughts on what the difference is between some of those words?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Spooky is a Halloween party that has, come for a spooky evening, something that's...
Spooky is the Monster Mash, right? Yeah.
Spooky is like trick-or-treating, I think, yeah, I totally agree, and I don't know if I really thought about it until you sent me the outline, and I started thinking about these different words, and like I, started thinking about like different experiences I've had where like what's haunted, something that's been very haunting.
Yeah.
And it's funny because haunting is a weird word because we use it in context of like something that's not completely not scary, like haunting beauty, or it was a haunting melody, right? Like these are not scary things; these are things that just kind of stay with us. you know,
It's like
the
emotional
thoughts of haunted.
starch. Like it sticks to your ribs, as it were,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Like I think, but like I don't know. It's funny because like outside of a haunted house, I feel like the word haunted really has no negative connotation, right? Like, oh, this house is haunted. Okay, that's bad, but here's a haunting, you know, landscape.
I think perhaps. I mean, I think it depends on what you're describing with any of these words, right? You put haunted in the context of a person who looks like they need help and they haven't recovered for a long time, right? So all of a sudden, they had a full plate at the ghost buffet. It's sticking to their ribs, and they can't shake it, right? They've got the ghost heartburn, what have you. That might be scary, but I actually this occurred to me as you were describing this, Kohl, where maybe spooky is essentially like the theme park version of scary, where it's like it has these limits that it doesn't get any worse than discomfort, But you'll probably, even knowing that, the clever spooky still pulls it off, right? I'm not Monster Mash probably doesn't pull it off because it's too familiar and
yeah. But like so I took the word creepy and I thought like we could think of like, oh, this creepy person came up to me out of nowhere, right? And like when I say that, it makes us go like, okay, something not safe is good. But you wouldn't say this spooky person, right? Like what do they have, a witch's hat on, right? There's something inherently tame and spooky. Creepy suddenly gets a little bit more dangerous. So this got me thinking, can you, I'm going back to my old days of wanting to chart everything. It's like, could you chart this on a spectrum? It's like what's on the far end of safe and what's on like the dangerous end, and like haunting is like one of those weird ones, like you said, Cole, because like, yeah, like haunting can be both positive and negative. Haunting just means that it like stays with you, like it haunts you. It comes up in your mind a lot, whether or not you wanted it to, right? But that's different than frightening, or terrifying, right? Like terrifying is one of those is it an adjective? It's an adjective that we throw around like kind of loosey-goosey. But like when you think of something that's real terror, like when was the last time you experienced real terror, right?
Yeah. Like I think terror is like probably the most primal of them, where terror is like, I now need to leave this situation, right? Like I am being hunted, whatever it is, and I'm terrified, right?
Yeah.
Whereas I think the word horror has like an element of revulsion in it, like you're revolted by something, like you're horrified, but like terror is like the bear is behind me. And I'm not revolted by the bear.
Right.
But I'm like, my lizard brain is now functioning and I'm just running. And I'm not thinking about why this is revolting me or whatever. Like, so I always think of terrifying as like, it's like getting shocked where like all you can do is like clench your muscle. Your body is one giant muscle and you're just terrified.
Right.
But, I don't know. I'd probably throw terror maybe at the bottom at the end of your chart.
Spectrum.
Super curious about these three buckets.
You stop thinking at that point. When you're terrified, you stop thinking and you're just fight or flight.
I think that's right on. Where you're reminding me of sort of three modes of cognition, where you have your rational, your emotional, and then your sort of primal, right, or lizard or survival, right? But basically, those three: rational, emotional, survival. Would some of these words easily be bucketed in that way, where it sure sounds like terror goes straight into the the survival bucket, lizard bucket, right?
Yeah, and then horror is like what Cole was saying. I think that you're spot on. There's like an element of revulsion in it too. I think of my favorite horror moments in stories and cinema. Usually there's something kind of icky and either it's like some kind of like uncanny valley thing where it's like a ventriloquist dummy in the dark, right? Or a man made of bugs, right? One of those two. There's something repulsive visually about it and like propped up next to normalcy to make me feel like super uncomfortable. right? That's horror to me. Right? Is
Right.
that kind of, like,
Is there a rational one though? Like so you're mentioning horror now. That sounds pretty emotional. But
Yeah.
is there one that could ever fall into rational? Is anything?
I've thinking about this, and it kind of bleeds into the next section. I think one of the things why we want this thing. I don't want to jump in too early on this. Why we
No,
want
please go where you want to go, Cole.
Roll with it.
to. But I think a lot about like escapism, right? Like we turn to a lot of media for escapism, and even media that's very challenging and makes us think. That's still eliciting like a certain response. And so I think horror, in the most general sense of that word, as a genre sense, is so popular because it pulls like a very powerful emotion from us. You know what I'm saying? Like, like you can watch, and everybody's different, right? Like everybody responds. Some people get really scared and they hate horror, and some people get really scared and they love horror, and then some people don't get scared but they love horror. You know what I'm saying? Like it's a different thing, and you could substitute horror with romantic comedies, right? Like it's the same. It's just a genre, but this genre is made to elicit a very specific response. Kind of like comedies, like dramas don't have a very specific response to be pulled, but comedies, and like that's kind of why you always say, like, when you're making a film, if it's a comedy or a horror, you kind of know how successful it is right away, because our people, if people aren't laughing through your movie, then you failed to make a comedy.
Right. Yeah.
And these two genres elicit these responses that are so strong that like you can kind of read them very quickly. Whereas if you do a drama, then you have to wait for people to come up afterwards and go, that was good, I liked it, or whatever. So I think we keep going back to horror. Like it's a genre that's persisted. Because rationally, it doesn't make sense that we'd want to be scared, right? Like we want security, we don't want to be scared, and maybe this is going into an evolutionary thing where we no longer are being hunted, and so we like that. We want to tap into that primalness, that primal element. But I still see it as an escape, right? Like we go and we want to get scared, but when we're feeling scared, we're not conscious of like, how are we going to pay the rent? How are we going to, like all these things that are on our mind, we've escaped from it. And it's very powerful. It's a very powerful drug in some ways.
Because I thought I had one lined up for like rational until you said that. Because I was thinking about like one of my big fears is being cornered by something I can't reason with. Right. Like I could have the greatest speech in the world why this doesn't have to go down this way, but if they are unable to or incapable of hearing what I'm saying, then it's over, right? And I was like, okay, that's a rational fear, right? But that's a fear based on an inability to reason, so it's still an emotional one. But yeah, I mean, like, and everybody makes the roller coaster analogy. Why do we go on thrill rides, right? Because it's like eliciting a powerful reaction to something in a safe way, right? And like I went to Disneyland for the first time ever, like 2 or 3 years ago, and I got to go on the Indiana Jones ride. You ever been on that, Cole?
Did you say at Disneyland?
Disneyland, yeah.
Yeah, I've been to Disneyland. I haven't been, but I did ride it in the Disneyland that's in France. I rode, but that one's totally different.
Oh, did it still have like the Mola Ram stuff in it, like the Temple of Doom stuff?
The one in France was more like the Kohl cart. It was more like a roller coaster.
Okay.
And it was like whipping around some ruins on some scaffolding and stuff like that. But the Disneyland one where you go up and you can go different directions and stuff like that.
Yeah, like the one I went on, you're like in like some kind of Jeep, and then
Right, right.
and Sala is like narrating your journey.
Yeah.
But we're going through, and like there's like the big boulder, and then there's like you go through like the hallway with like the little holes in the wall, and like little jets of air kind of fly out, like as if there's like poison darts coming at you, and it's all great. But like I remember thinking, like, if we don't go through a room filled with fire and scary faces like in Temple of Doom, this isn't gonna feel right, you know? And then we go in, and the music plays, and the scary music plays, and like there's all just like big gusts of like red smoke popping, or red steam popping in the air, and it was a little bit unnerving. And I was like, okay, this is it. This is now I'm in the Indiana Jones world. This is great. You know, like I don't feel like it's not an Indiana Jones story unless I'm a little bit scared, you know?
Right.
But so yeah, I guess this is all to say that I think I'm in agreement with you on that. Like there's something inherently emotional about it, right? I don't know, Rob. Can you tie it into some kind of rationality?
No, I actually I would guess that it's probably it would be hard to build a case to support a rational argument as far as having a rational fear, right? I think it's inherently emotion and survival based. I think you guys characterized it super well. One thing you did remind me about, however, is the which we probably should talk about this later, but the video game Dark Escape 4D, which
Yes.
it's quite a nice little portable, relatively speaking, compared to a whole theme park.
Okay,
but a nice
we can
little
talk about it now.
scary box.
We can talk about it now because I think we only talked about this on Extra Lean, and I'm certain that Cole hasn't heard this story of how you ruined me, Rob. You heard of this game, Cole?
Do you have sort of arcades with sort of deluxe games like a Dave and Buster's near you, perhaps? Because that's where this kind of game you'd encounter it. It's one of those things where it looks like one of those old sit down. You and a buddy can be shooting at a screen, big screen in front of you, but it's got little curtains on the side and whatever. But it's kind of like one of those big arcadey boxy things, and it's got some pretty creepy art of a person trying to get out from bars. They don't look like they're doing too well. It's very creepy, right? I would say that
I'm gonna pull up imagery for it right now.
Yeah, there you go. It's right on as far as what you're pulling up. It's very creepy. But the game itself has essentially like this sort of multifaceted way to immerse you. Well, yeah, okay, it has. Well, someone has written and directed scenes where there's a lot of misdirection, where they'll draw your attention here, but then scare you over there, and that kind of thing. But layered on top of that is, well, you have a gun and you have to shoot these evil things that come at you and creepy things. But the gun has a pulse meter on it, and if your pulse is too fast, your gun will jam. Right, so there's that. Plus,
and it's an arcade. It's reading your your actual
little sensor on your finger, near your fingers on the trigger. Right.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and it has these other things where it's like very booming rumble seat. It has the puffs of air, and it combines all this. It considers 4 dimensions of Scary Town, and it will. Absolutely scared the crap out of Jersey, evidently. And I felt bad, honestly. Like, it was going, like, I felt impish at first as Jersey walks up to this machine. And I had played this with my wife, and it was a ton of fun. But actually, Jersey and his wife get into this machine, and I'm thinking, Jersey doesn't like horror that much. But all right, little giggling's going on inside. Okay, cool. Let's see what happens. 30 seconds in, there's a grown man screaming, and I'm like, that's it. It's over. He hates me now. We're gonna leave this place, and it's gonna be nothing but, I don't know.
It wasn't there like some total Abbott Costello moment where like a kid walked up to play the game, then heard me, and then walked away?
Exactly, because so that happened, and then I ducked behind the cabinet, and I'm like laughing so hard I'm crying, but also telling my wife I feel terrible, and so I'm having mixed emotions. And then this kid walks up like, ooh, I'm going to be next, kind of like has his little swipe card ready to go, waiting, and then he hears Jersey, and he's like, nope. Boom. He just turns around and leaves. Anyway, highly recommend it. There's YouTube videos. where you can get a taste of it, but the real deal is actually sitting in the thing. And
It's like the best execution of jump scares I've ever seen in my life. Like, it was
Really?
totally effective. Like, and it's like, it was coming one after another. It's like the camera swooshes and it's like, okay, I just saw a body as the camera swooshed. That thing's gonna come up and jump at me. I know it's coming, but then the rumble seat kicks in, the puff of air hits me in the face, and there's the three-dimensionality of it where it's like kind of coming out of the screen. It's like it just undid me. So yeah, and I was screaming like a ninny, but I wasn't like
no,
like,
it was more like, I mean, I think you were going to survive, but you were
Yeah.
going to be the worst for your surviving. You were going to take out the zombies, right?
Yeah.
But like, it wasn't. Yeah,
But that was fun, and I
Gonna
would
be
totally do
sunshine.
it again. I would totally do it again, because it was perfectly safe.
that's wild. What a weird thing. Like that. So that perfectly fits that. I don't know that escapist characterization. I think Kohl had.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's why we wanted, and one of the things when you guys asked me to talk about this with you, I started thinking about things that we love that is kind of macabre and not scary, and how much because I'm a huge fan. Like, I've always kind of really liked dark things and things like creepy things and stuff like that. But like, I can watch a scary movie. Some movies, obviously, again, they affect everyone differently, and but I generally don't like like scaring myself out of for no reasons. But I do love like things that are very macabre, and how that macabre is like outside of being a genre, it's also kind of an aesthetic.
Mm.
And I was thinking about this the other day about like I loved the Addams Family when I was a teenager, and I didn't have a job during the summer. I was like watching like Get Smart and the Addams Family, and I loved it. And I tried to watch it again the other day, and I was like, this is just like silly gags about like what if there's a family that just loves really, really creepy things, but they're not. I mean, it's like doesn't even approach being scary, but it's that aesthetic of the bats and thing, and what I'm saying, like, and I think that there's a real draw to that kind of aesthetic. I would say like a really great recent entry into that would be Crimson Peak. I don't know if you guys have seen that movie.
No.
It's Guillermo del Toro's new movie, and it's a haunted house movie. And I had saw a review about it beforehand, and these guys, it was a YouTube review, and these guys were like, you need to understand, because they had seen a sneak preview, and Guillermo del Toro had been at their thing, and he got up and said, the marketing of this movie has been all wrong. This movie is not a horror movie. It's a Victorian romance with ghosts. And in the movie, like in the very, very, very early scenes, they even say, oh, it's not really a ghost story, but there's ghosts in it, and the ghosts are a metaphor. I thought it was great how he just kind of set the tone for the movie. And it's beautiful. I mean, this house is rotting and falling apart, and it's called Crimson Peak because there's this red clay that looks so much like blood, and like it's a very creepy aesthetic. And there's a lot of jump scares, but it wasn't like I didn't leave just feeling really like scared and unsettled. I was just like, oh, that was like one of the most beautiful movies I've ever seen.
Wow.
So you're talking about, and this is like you're sort of anticipating where we're going, like this, the sense of atmosphere and suspense and stuff. Like I think of like Tim Burton films, like The Nightmare Before Christmas, a classic, right?
Right.
Which there are parts of it that push it starts to get close to the edge for me. Like when that clown comes at the screen, and clowns are inherently unsettling, and it's the clown with the tearaway face, right?
Yeah.
Which I was like, okay, that's a little bit weird, a little bit creepy, but like that's what makes the darn movie so darn good, is that sense of place that it has.
Yeah.
Where Halloween Town like has like a cohesive aesthetic and like a sense of like celebrating morbidness and decay and
Right.
and ruination of things. Like I don't know, there is something kind of I don't know. Is it too philosophical to say that like there's something almost accepting life in its entirety to also accept that stuff too, and not be completely repulsed by it because that's all part of the bag?
No, I think that's totally acceptable, and I think that like Nightmare Before Christmas is a great example because it delves heavily into the aesthetic of horror films, but there was no danger, there was no threat, I don't even remember jump scares, right? Like it was just like, like it was very benign. It just was built within this aesthetic, and we enjoy that. We enjoy that. That atmosphere and the thing without, but like again, I think that I guess the point I'm trying to make with even just bringing that up is that there's an aesthetic that is pleasing, not to everyone again, but to a lot of people who kind of see it as it's not the like scare me, activate my primal senses. It's kind of like I just want to hang out in this room for a while and read books. You know what I'm saying? Like I just want to be around that
a little increase in fantasy and reality, right? It's just like a little amplification of let's see, kind of like how Halloween it is in this time of year where we celebrate a lot of I don't know, it's a lot of symbols and celebration, right? And it just happens to be these things that are macabre. And what were you saying?
Well, this is funny because I was Rob, you know this. I'm gonna do inside baseball and say that I was kind of like reluctant to dive into this topic for a while, right? I was like I don't know if I have anything to say like that's useful about this. But one thing I do think, and I want to pitch it at you guys and like see if your bats can hit it, or see if I'm just throwing a gutter ball, mixing up my metaphors here. But it's when you're pensive and introspective, and there's like this calm, like there's like a aloofness and darkness to quietude, and these kind of symbols perhaps are externalizations of that, like visual metaphors, visual poetry for the feelings of introspection, aloofness, with being withdrawn, which corresponds to the time of year because it gets darker earlier in the day, right? We see life retracting. We see the leaves falling off the trees. We see things withering.
Well, it's the time of the harvest and after the harvest.
That too. Yeah. There's the sewing, right? And not sewing as in stitching, but anyway. So like I think that part of that aesthetic because I don't like certain kinds of horror. I mean, like I'm really like even like, and I've said this 100 times, Pacific Rim, too scary for me. But Resident Evil, the old game for the PS1, loved it, adored it, had a wonderful time playing it. Why? And I think primarily it was because of the atmosphere in that game and this feeling of isolation and cold and mysterious and eerie, There's something about that kind of tone of fantasy that is really fun to live in the contexts that are appropriate to us, right? And so my question is, do you think that this might be some kind of like playing on a symbol system that speaks to the fact that even the most extroverted of us sometimes feel a little withdrawn and pensive, and these become symbols for that kind of thing? Sitting in the cemetery and reading poetry, right?
Yeah. Like, and what I mean, I kind of have a thing for cemeteries. We live very close to the Salt Lake Cemetery, and it's like very old. And it's like cemeteries that have flat plaques. It might as well be a park. But these are like actually headstones, and the headstones are old, and they're kind of. And I'm like, and I've often thought like, we'll all go. I went to a film festival in Williamstown, Massachusetts, and just found this like cemetery that was just like everything was black, and it was just like just so gorgeous. And I'm sitting there going, why am I responding to this so much? Like I know that, and occasionally you'll talk to somebody and they're like, oh yeah, I really love cemeteries. I'm like, me too. Like it's this like secret thing where it's like. And I don't find cemeteries scary at all. I find them peaceful, but I love the old and the rotting and the, like it's beautiful. and I wish I could just go and say, this is what's inside of me. This is what it's scratching this itch. But I don't know. I just love the macabre, I guess. I don't know.
And I mean, I think we're getting at it by exploring and via the descriptions. I just want to bring up a word I feel like we've walked around, but we haven't said. So forgive me if this is just like just really inappropriate dumb guy thing, but like goth, right? I mean, are we talking about like a goth aesthetic as well? And is that not the same as the macabre and close relative? Okay. Because a lot of times that's brought up when you hear description of Tim Burton films and anything Gothic architecture, and I mean that it's sense of foreboding, and it's all pointy and dangerous looking in various ways, or
and the aloofness and the mystery are a key component for me, at least. Like, I think that's like what I find attractive about that too, is like the fact that it's kind of inscrutable, right? Like, like, okay, if we want to go to like stereotypes, like a goth person as we think of them, right? They're not telegraphing how they feel, right? When you talk to them, they're not going, responding with their face in any way, right? There's like this kind of like this straight-faced kind of response. And I think that inscrutability is part of the aesthetic that I find interesting about it. You don't know what's going on behind that wall, right? And we talked about this a bunch of times. Like in the Resident Evil game, what made it work for me is the fact that they worked with the limitations of the game and of the technology at the time to say that you can't turn the environment the way you can in Mario 64, right? You have a static background. Your character can walk to that corner, and we're going to play with the stereo sound to make you hear a little shuffling and groaning around that corner. But you have to bring your character right up to that corner before we're going to show you what's there. Right? And that sense of mystery and playing with what we don't see is what made the tone of that game work so much for me, right? Even when I played it with one of my best friends, where we had a walkthrough, we printed out a walkthrough, and we were playing it step by step. We still were like, oh God, like just that sense of, like what's it gonna look like, when we turn around the corner. So, I think like not knowing, and this is where. Maybe it's visual jazz, I guess, if you want to be really obnoxious about it. It's like what you don't see also counts, right?
I think atmosphere, like obviously atmosphere isn't everything when it comes to horror, because we have movies that are set in very domestic situations, and they're terrifying, right? Like, we're not sitting there going, oh, I love the way that house makes me feel. It's like, that story's not even about that house, right? It's just happening in houses and whatever. But then you do have, when you do have a nice atmospheric, I mean, I think about this a lot, where, if I'm working late at night, I have a new office, and it's like, in this over 100-year-old carriage house, and
oh, cool.
I'm working late at night, and my brain starts, like, my brain actually does like, what could I see right now that would freak me out the most? Like, I don't know why I do this, and I don't enjoy this. Like, I have work to do. I don't need to be sitting there going, like, looking around, like trying to like, oh, was there something at the window? Like,
yeah.
And I don't know why my brain does that, but like. Like, I could be at home in the exact same hour, like 2 a.m, working, and think that same thing and just be like, well, it's my apartment. Like, my kids around, like, they're in there. So, like, your setting is very, like, I think a lot about, like, how, when things really scare me, and, like, where I'm at and what I'm doing, and if I'm like, okay, I'll just use an example because I wanted to bring this up. It's probably one of the things I probably should use for my 3 scary things. But have you guys heard of the game, The Uncle Who Works for Nintendo?
That's a game.
It's a text-based game. There's an actual term for these games, but basically it's basically like a choose your own adventure. But it's got some sounds and stuff, and it's about, you go and you hang out with your friend. Your friend invites you over for a sleepover, and one of the great things about it is it feels very, very like nostalgic from the 80s, right? Like you go and you hang out with your friend, and the parents are there, and you eat dinner with them, and then you go and like your friend starts playing Nintendo, and he's got a Nintendo you've never seen, and you're like, oh, my uncle gave me this test Nintendo. And it is an incredibly creepy game. Like it's just really like, how, I don't know, like it just kind of like the sounds, and I think it taps into the times we've all been there, right? Where we went and we spent the night at our friend's house, and it was like the first time we've ever done it, and it's a little scary because you're just kind of like, I don't know what the rules of this family are. I don't even like this family suddenly seemed normal, but now they're weird. Like these are real things, right? But this one just takes it to a new kind of, and it was very unsettling in a very pleasant, scary way. Now, I use that as an example because I played that when I was alone and I had headphones on, and I was, I don't remember what time of day it was, but I think it might have been in the evening. And it was really effective time. I could have played that with my kid running around the living room, and I would have been like, meh. Like it just wouldn't have been, and I think that's this is going back to the atmosphere, not only the atmosphere that the whatever the media that we're partaking of creates, but also the atmosphere that we currently have around us. And I think that video games are great because you are more immersed in that. It would be the same as going to a really good haunted house or something where you're in that situation. And I always think it's funny that like, so right, I'm currently playing, I finally got a PlayStation 4, and I'm currently playing Arkham Knight because, as we said before,
Batman.
I had to. And not to give away anything about the game because it's fantastic, but Batman his mind gets infected, and so some creepy things happen where like you turn away and you turn back, and like maybe the Joker's there. Or there was one time when I was walking by some statues and they all had Joker smiles.
Oh, wow.
And you look back and they're gone, and you're just like, oh, that was so freaking awesome. Like I love that they did that. Like it was creepy, and it's like you can immerse yourself in that, but. I don't want to go on too many tangents on my already tangent.
But okay, but to build off your point, Shadowing Tronics is in the chat, and he talked about responding to one of our earlier points about spooky is the Haunted Mansion at Disney, scary is the Amityville House, and Amityville House does not have the aesthetic that we were talking about, the visual aesthetic that we were talking. I mean, it has kind of that face when they show it, and then whenever they do show it, they always have like the little voices singing the La La song. But what sets the atmosphere is again that sense.
Uh-oh. Did we lose Jersey?
We might have. The call won't drop, but Jersey will probably be back within a minute or so.
I think he was making a great point.
I know. Yeah, the Amityville. He'll pick it up, so we'll remind him. But no, that's cool. It's actually pretty easy to just edit this little chunk, what have you, unless we have something to dive into. I'm reminded of oh gosh, was it Eternal Darkness? That's a video game for the GameCube that there was a lot of the sort of playing with your perception sort of effects, and causing anything from like your controls to get mismatched, and up wasn't up anymore, or that kind of thing. And it was about emulating your character losing sanity.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And that was pretty effective. A bit. Yeah. What's funny is that's a game I played enough of it to be super stoked, and I haven't gone back to it. But I made sure I bought the guide Should I get stuck and look at if a few, like a decade has passed and it's still on the shelf. Anyway, it's it was so cool and intriguing. I gave it such a special place where I'm like, I didn't know when I would be like, okay, now I'm ready to be this scared, or yep, now I'm ready to to do that kind of escape, and yeah, I guess it was so obviously there. I didn't know if I wanted to go there once I knew it was there, but
and it's kind of along those lines. I think it's kind of interesting how I've played very, very limitedly, if that's a word. I've played the Cthulhu like the RPG.
Oh, sure.
I don't know if you're available or aware of that one, but
I've played a lot of that over the years. Played a lot of different characters and whatnot.
Yeah, so
I have a few friends who are just pretty, have done an awesome job making fun adventures there. So,
yeah, and I think it's kind of cool
how would you describe it?
Like that one has like, you have the insanity points and like you see something and then you have to, it's kind of like doing a saving throw and like you have points and you're losing your sanity as you're kind of dealing more and more with this horror element. And I think that was, obviously that plays in really well with H.P. Lovecraft and his whole idea of like, it's like there's something horrific and then you spiral off into insanity, and the thing that was horrific is not really that, that well described. It's just kind of there, and then the aftermath is described, and so you can have that whatever it was thing kind of be a mystery or be there in your mind. But it's kind of like what you're saying. It's like, having your perceptions be warped as and
I think it's almost what you're describing. It's like a follow the dots kind of fear exercise where however you want to connect the dots, you can like his stories let you fill that in, and yeah, you can essentially scare yourself. And I think that the game it's an interesting thing because we're talking about essentially a pen and paper game that it's like a interactive storytelling, sitting around a table, someone's facilitating, called a game master. They're presenting you different, they're playing different characters in the story and whatnot. But then, you and your friends are trying to navigate the scenario where you're all improvising and acting off one another. And like you said, you got this scarce resource of your the sanity score you're trying to manage, and ultimately, it's kind of funny because a lot of games, it's really, you're going to lose almost always, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's about like the story you can tell with the that as far as the sessions that I went through, what was that a good session, right? And that wasn't like, oh, we survived and we killed this big magical terrible monster. No, like most of us died. My character is locked up somewhere, whatever, and that's. But yet, wow, all the stories we have to tell along the way.
Exactly.
And, and Jersey's back.
Jersey's back.
Sorry about that. Internet dropped out for a second, but it's back.
Yeah, you were saying last we heard was about the
Amityville House, right? And
gosh, man, I went on for a long time after that, and that just goes to show how much I look for visual cues that people are even listening. Yeah, all I was saying was Amityville House was like, it's a situation where aesthetically it doesn't have the trappings of like the Nightmare Before Christmas or the Addams Family, yet the atmosphere was built through what is shown and what isn't shown.
Right.
Like it's the plot there's like a plot atmosphere, which I think we'll talk about in the on the ground section. Do we want to head there in a second?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think
I got back just in time to do the transition to go on the ground. So
timing's awesome.
1 minute and 30 seconds, we are going to go on the ground and talk about, what are we going to talk about? How to do this. We thought about like the whys and the general sort of like abstract notions of what makes a story scary and why we like to be scared. Now let's talk about how to make scary things in our stories, how to make a story scary, how to make a scene scary. But before we get to that, we do need to, oh, you know what? I apologize. I have to pull up the screen grab again because as I got kicked out of the, as I got kicked off the internet, I lost my screen share. So there we go. Okay. So now this show has been brought to you by the people who support us on Patreon. That's patreon.com/leanintoart. And we got to thank some special patrons who have helped out the show for a good number of time. We got Kim Holm, cartoonarchy.com, Danunga Holm on the Twitters. He's got a great comic that you can get for free called Pikmin's Model. You can do a search for that. We'll link to it in the show notes. But that's a very scary story. It's a Lovecraft story. He did a terrific job of translating it into comic book form. Jamie Gamble on Twitter. Monkey Pipe Studios, another terrific comic book writer who has a whole fleet of books out, including The Hero Code and more. And Heather Robinson, Half Size Me on Twitter. Thank you for your support, Heather. Angela Mitchell, thank you for supporting us. I couldn't find your Twitter handle. If you have one, let us know and we can include it in the show notes. And then finally, Miriam Van de Vijer. I hope I said that right. And her Twitter handle is MYRJAMVDV. Miriam shows up in a lot of my Boulder and Fleet live streams. It's always fun to talk with her. So thanks a lot, everybody. Your support means a lot to us. You can go to patreon.com/leanintoart to sign up for a Patreon account to, participate in the Circle of Trust posts where we just have like an open mic sort of thing where we just discuss things with you guys. And then we also have the Extra Leans where between these shows, Rob and I get together and do this like weird little improvisational game where we start a show without having a topic in mind and find the topic through the making of the show. So thanks everybody for supporting us on Patreon. With that, Rob, are you ready to go on the ground?
Very ready. I think it's time to explore how do we scare people? How do we frighten our audiences?
Here comes the scary music.
I really do want to learn this. I don't know how.
So, okay, Kohl, you did this movie called The Stepsister, which you said was a thriller, which is different than horror, but I assume that there are similarities in that you're trying to build suspense in the story, right?
Right.
I wonder if you talk about that a little bit, like when you were like, not to spoil anything with The Stepsister, but when you're working on such a story, or even Orc Wars, where like you're really trying to make these guys feel threatening, right? So that it's not just like a bunch of Rankin Bass goblins like come trotting out singing "Where there's a whip, there's a way," but things that feel like really menacing and mysterious and strange and all the powerful emotions we've been discussing through this. What are some ways that you think about constructing those scenes?
That's interesting. I'm trying to think of what my thought process is. I think it's a very, very basic. I had a friend that said this to me, and I know he didn't make this up, but he was the first one that ever said it to me. And he said, like, horror comes from something that's not human that acts human, or something that is human that acts inhuman, right? Like that's why the uncanny valley is like. You get freaked out because we're registering that's a human, but then there's also something else. Like that is in a human, inhuman type thing. I think that if you approach things from that kind of perspective, and you can be very liberal on how you name, I think a lot of these thrillers, especially, The Stepsister, it's called The Stepsister because there's an evil stepsister in a, like she's, stepping back, like these 90s thrillers, like Single White Female, Hand the Rocks to Cradle, all these movies are about somebody being very close to you who's very dangerous. And because they're close to you, you don't see it. They're allowed to be very, very close to you. I'd like to think it's like similar to being like, suddenly realizing there's a great white behind you, right? Like this great white is way closer than you thought. You were in the ocean, great whites are in the ocean, but suddenly it's way closer than you think. And all these thrillers are like, this psychopath is the person that you trust and you love and that's close to you, and they're gonna kill you or hurt you or destroy you or sabotage you or whatever. So the idea of suddenly having something be closer than you realize it being, that is a very common fear tactic in storytelling is to suddenly turn around and have the monster is right here,
Yeah,
or
you're right. Yeah.
or the monster's over my shoulder, or my whatever it is, but suddenly it's way closer than you think it is. And that you can get a lot of good scares off that. And in Stepsister, I'm now talking more about how we did shots. Where we would, like there's a part where she comes in, she goes in and she tries to kill the best friend by throwing her off like this parking garage, and she sneaks up behind her, and the best friend's talking, and she's walking up in the background, getting close. Like the best friend walks in and suddenly we see her way in the background, and then she just starts walking and she's getting closer and closer, and the friend's talking on the phone, and that shot was intended to be like, turn around, turn around, turn around,
Yeah.
but she doesn't, and it's too late and she gets thrown off. I think that is definitely part of it. I think another part, a huge part, is to building up the suspense of it. Like if you think about, one of the scariest moments in all of cinematic history is when Large Marge's face goes right.
For sure, right?
In
Yeah,
the middle
Pee-wee's
of a
Big
movie
Adventure.
that's just not scary,
Yeah.
right? Like it's just not scary.
Yeah.
And why is it scary? It's because we've heard this scary story, and we see Pee-wee sitting there, and and she said, and when they they built it up. It wasn't just like, if she would have just went, like, yeah, get in my truck, he would just, what? You know what I'm saying? But like, it was set up. Another really great moment I think about is in Mulholland Drive, when at the very beginning the guy's talking about, like, he has this vivid dream where there's this creature waiting behind the dumpster in this restaurant that he's in, and his therapist is like, well, let's go back there right now and go see that the creature's not there. This guy, he's describing this guy, and he's like, I'm just so terrified of this guy. And like, they walk back there, and it's like the guy's terrified, and he's walking really slow, and all of a sudden this guy steps out, and he dies of the guy is scared and dies of a heart attack. And it's really terrifying because and the funny thing is, like, that we've been around as an audience, we've been around for a while, so when you're getting set up, but in that sense, in Mulholland Drive, you didn't know, like, you didn't know if there was going to be somebody there. You felt like there probably wasn't, and this guy was just terrified. So when you can undercut that and not just be like, yeah, like, here's scary, and then jump scare. Yeah, we got it. Like, we all know the vernacular. We're
like in a horror movie now, if you see somebody in a bathroom splashing water on their face,
right,
and there's a mirror in the vanity, we know that unless they're going to subvert our expectations there, we know what's coming, right?
Right.
Open the medicine cabinet, get the aspirin, pour it in your hand, like, whew, and you close the medicine cabinet.
And there's the creature.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's easy. There's low hanging fruit, and we all know when it's coming. But I still feel like you have to do that. Like, you have to kind of set it up, where like another one of my favorite movies ever is Psycho. And like, they set up a lot of, like, so the first murder, the shower scene, we as an audience see it happen, right? Like, Marion Crane does not see the entrance, but we see the door open. We see a figure come up to the shower curtain, stand there for a moment, pull it back, then she reacts,
Yeah.
But the other murders, Arbogast, when he comes in, he comes up the stairs very, very slowly. And I found that when I first saw that, I think I was like 13, terrified me. The camera goes up, right? Like, it comes above. It's a very unnatural view, and we already have him. We already know, right? Like, there is a murder in the house, and he's coming up the stairs, and then we get this weird above the view, and we see the mother walk out. I won't ruin the movie for you guys if you haven't seen it. And I remember just being so scared of, like, because we're sitting there for a little bit and he's coming up the stairs, and then all of a sudden she just walks out and knifes him.
Yeah.
And, you know, he's not scared. He's kind of like, oh, I came to talk to you, you know. But like we know what's going on. So you build that up, and then you have that scary release. You know,
there's the don't go in that room thing. It's funny you bring up Hitchcock, because I'm reminded of something he said, and I think this was on the Dick Cavett show, where he said, like, you have 5 people sitting at a dinner table. They're talking about baseball. They're talking about politics. It's like most boring scene in the world. If I pan down and show that there's a ticking bomb under that table, suddenly we care about everything everybody's saying in that room. You know.
Right.
Because you're wondering, who knows? Who's going to figure it out? How are they going to get out of there in time? Or are they going to get out of there in time? Like, when you give the audiences a little bit more information than the characters in terms of, like, the proximity of the threat, right? Yeah, don't go in that room. There's a thing in there, you know? And I think about, I'm going to drop a link to something else in a moment where I talked about this, but I think about a lot of the nightmares I had as a child revolved around me knowing something that was dangerous out there, and nobody in the family believing me. Mom, Dad, there's a thing outside, and we got to get out of here. And Mom says, no, there's not. And then the thing comes in. You know, like, a lot of my nightmares revolve around that kind of motif. So I can see that being really powerful, right? Like, yeah. So, like, in a lot of those horror films, it's sometimes it's about surprising the audience as much as it's about building their expectation, right?
Right. Yeah, and I think I would be interested in seeing ones where they just had scares that weren't set up. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of times you don't know. Like, sometimes you just don't know what's being set up. You know, like, you pan along and you're following a character and they're moving through their house, and like somebody said, just like kind of drifts past the window. You know, that can be scary, even though you didn't know you were being set up. But you're kind of in some ways, you're being set at ease. It's like, okay, they're putting down their keys, they're setting down the groceries. And then all of a sudden there's, you know, but kind of going along. I mean, by that I meant, like, there's an eye at the closet or something that you see. And I mean, one of the things that terrifies me, I mean, they're very quite scary, is whenever those, like, you know, those when you see it type photos, where somebody's like, here's a photo, and then you realize that there's somebody, you know, like, there's a girl, like, right in front of you that you cannot, you know, like, you didn't see because she's, like, hiding. Or I remember seeing one that was, it was a family photo, and then you notice that there's, like, somebody, like, looking out underneath the cushions. They're all sitting on somebody.
Oh,
They're
yeah.
just, you know, and it's like, it's one of those, like, when you see it and you're like, yeah, you know, like, again, this is like something being closer, something unexpected being closer than you realize, you know, like, if it was, like, way off in the distance, yeah, sure. But it's like, no, she's under the cushions, you know, like.
Oh yeah, I forget which movie this was, but the call is coming from inside the house.
Right.
That's like it's almost a cliche now, but, like, there's something really intense about that, right? And actually, to people in the post cell phone age, that doesn't even make any sense anymore. But, like,
Right.
in the '80s, that was some powerful mojo.
Exactly.
It was
when our
scary.
phones went like this with the round things. Yeah.
One of the things I think I just saw I don't know if you guys ever watched the Idea channel, YouTube channel. It's a PBS digital. I enjoy it quite a bit. And they were talking about the 5 monsters, and I can't remember. So there's a guy who wrote a book, and I can't remember the book. It's like, but if you watch the thing about the 5 different monsters, he talks about it.
Okay.
And basically this other guy has, like, laid out 5. Here's 5 different types of monsters. But in the beginning of that thing, he says, you know, when we're dealing with monsters, particularly, when we get scared, we're not scared. Like, it's very an empathetic scare. Like, are we really scared that, you know, a giant dinosaur lizard thing is going to, like, destroy our city? You know, like, is that, I mean, I don't know if I would be interested to see if there's any person on the planet that thinks Godzilla is scary, like, other than, you know, mayhem. But, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's we don't always say, "Oh, I'm actually really scared of this creature. I'm really scared of a Sharknado or something." We're just like, I just am empathizing with the characters who are scared, you know.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because that plays against the giving the audience more information than your character, right? Like Arbogast isn't scared when he walks up that stairs and he sees the mother and he's like, oh, you're like, hey, I was going to talk to you, and then he gets a knife in his face. You know, like we know that he doesn't. But it is interesting to kind of see, you know, you project a lot of horror through your characters, and that kind of taps into it. But just to continue that tangent, the five different monsters is, and he had actual names for these groups, and I don't remember them, but one was like the fusion monster, where it's like two things put together. One of the things they kind of said was like zombies are this because they are like living and dead. Sharknado would be this type thing. And then you have the fission monster, which is like a werewolf that can actually be two different things at different times. You know what I'm saying? Like a zombie's always a zombie. You know, you have these kind of horrific monsters that are like something, but then like a werewolf can change, or something like that. And then the second one was very big monsters, like Godzilla and whatever and then the fourth one was little small, like many swarms of small monsters, like insects or whatever.
Oh yeah, Kingdom of the Spiders, right?
Yeah. And then the last one is like a monster that looks normal, but its surroundings is what is giving it away. Like they talked about Dracula, where he's very charming and he's very, but like he lives in a castle that's kind of unsettling in his, and it was interesting. The whole Idea Channel was about like, can you really put every monster in one of these five things? And then of course you have like, then you have to argue like the horror films that aren't monsters, like, I don't know if like a serial killer actually fits in there other than maybe the last one. But anyway, I think just going back to us, I think that's kind of like just a real quick, like, building up a lot of tension, setting it up, having things act unnatural to themselves. It's like a doll, right? Like a doll that kills people. We're scared of that because it looks like a little human, but it's very unhuman, and then it's acting like a human. It's really unsettling.
Right. It doesn't necessarily have anything to do with threat level, right? Because like in Poltergeist, that little clown in that boy's bedroom is so like not dangerous.
Right.
But the moment it starts moving, oh God.
Yeah. And I think that like rationally, going back to the rational thing, fear isn't, like, especially when we're horrified by something. Yeah. Are we really sitting there going, okay, what's the survival situation? What do I got to do to get out of this alive? We're just like, oh, something like that exists, and I'm like I don't want to see a moving doll. Yeah. But like if you had to fight a moving doll, right? Like you could win. But you don't think about that. You're like, okay, I know how to take this thing out. Or like, oh, a little kid zombie. Like I should be able to deal with the little kid zombie. But you're not thinking that. You're just kind of, horrified, like that. The rationality of like the mindfulness of your situation is not. I guess what I'm saying is, if you stopped and actually thought about what you had to do to survive the situation, you'd probably be way less scared.
Yeah, the excellent example with the little kid zombie, because I watched the remake of Dawn of the Dead from about almost 10 years ago now. And there's that scene in the beginning where the main character that we start following in the story sees her daughter standing in the hallway, and the daughter's just like kind of like slanting back and forth, making like a weird little raspy noise. And then suddenly this is when we find out that it's running zombies, right? Like that was like the big like break in the zombie etiquette. It was like, we got running zombies now. And she comes running down the hallway. Running down the hallway, it was totally lizard brain, like get away. But that wasn't nearly as frightening as her with the light, the little girl with the light behind her, swaying back and forth and making that noise. That was unnerving and repulsive, right?
She was not acting like a human.
Yep.
And you're not sitting there thinking, okay, I'm fighting this. You're thinking, oh, why does this exist?
Why does this? Yes.
Why does this exist? I mean, I know I'm talking a lot.
That's why we asked John.
My last point would probably be sound, and that's not something you can necessarily do in all the mediums, but I think sound will get you. You can throw so much terror, and that's one of the, going back to the uncle that works for Nintendo. The sounds are so eerie. You know, you're reading this thing, and it's, you know, but the sounds are eerie, and I think one of the reasons why this is doing is, again, an evolutionary thing, where we are cued by sound more than anything else, right? Like, our sense of smell is not great, but our hearing is pretty good, and so we, you know, when we hear something like a sound will cue us to danger a lot faster than, like, you know, I mean, how many times you hear somebody screaming and you're like, and then you see something happen right in front of you that would have caused that same screaming, and you're just kind of like, did that what? You know, like, it didn't like motivate you into like the fight or flight. And so I think this sound is huge. Like, you put some scary sounds in there, you put a little, you know, you throw a little bit of something in, and I don't know what the equivalent, like a literary equivalent of that was. I mean, I've read books where, you know, like, they talk about the sound, you know, but to actually hear it, and, you know, it can be very, very unsettling.
I was just talking about this with my students in class today because I was having the kids do some Halloween sort of like horror themed projects, and the topic came up of, like, why is it that little kids singing any kind of nursery rhyme in a darkened playground always works? Like, you could take the ABC song, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You put a little kid singing it, and you show, like, a playground with all the lights out at night, and boom, instantly scary, right?
Yeah. I think Nightmare on Elm Street was the one that's supposed to do that. I've done it first. I don't know if that's for sure. But yeah, little kid things. I don't know why, but like little kids singing, that could be scary. Like any little kid thing, you know. I think that's, but again, that's kind of flipping things on its head, where you're just like, you know, like, I'm going to take the most innocent, most helpless thing and make it a threat to you, you know. And that's just
threaten it.
Really effective.
Either way.
What's that, right?
Or threaten it. Either way, right? So, or both, because like there's a whole shelf of these things. I was in this Halloween store the other day, and there's these dolls that are essentially animatronic, and they pull their own head off and scream, and it turns out that's super creepy. And they look like a little kid, you know, little. You know, that kid's probably needs a bath. Their clothing's a bit tattered. Why are they grabbing their head for no reason? Don't know. But like you interact with the doll, and it's like, rawr, and I'm like, holy crap, that creeped me out. Because of that. And not just the, you know, like, oh, this is dangerous to me, but also, like, you know, caring about, you know, kids. That's
right.
We're wired to have a lot of empathy for, and that's why cute is cute, because kids.
That's another thing that we should underline here, is that a lot of this is based on your level of empathy, right? Like, so when I say that, like, Pacific Rim was a scary movie, I don't mean that the monsters looked scary and I felt scared. It was more about that, and I did a whole episode, which we can link to in the show notes, where I explained all this in great detail, like my position on this, but I didn't feel like the monsters had been set up as being properly motivated. So in my mind, watching the film, they were just wild animals. They were wild animals with too much power. And to watch people say, well, in order to deal with this, I need to gore this thing messily and very painfully, and this thing's going to suffer when I kill it. That was too upsetting to me, right? Because I was empathizing with the monsters in the story. So to see them being dispatched in such a way was too much, right? So it wasn't the tone, it wasn't the atmosphere, and it wasn't the threat. It was, you know, empathy has to be there for you to feel fear for fictional people, right?
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
So, like, part of your job as a storyteller is to solicit and engender that empathy through the character's story. But then again, and this could be a whole nother tangent, which we probably don't have time for today, but there are stories where it's interesting that there are cases where there are stories where the characters don't get a whole lot of characterization. Like zombie films in particular, I think, like, you really run into sort of like archetypes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there isn't like a whole lot of time to explore an arc in the story, especially because it's really about like the ruination of everything. And then, yeah, go ahead.
I think along those lines, like one of my favorite shows ever is The Twilight Zone.
That's one of my picks.
That was one of your picks?
Yeah, let's talk about it. It's great.
So The Twilight Zone doesn't have a lot of characterization because they don't have time. It's always about like this twist of something, and maybe it's a justified twist, or maybe, you know, I don't remember being a lot very unfairly like the good guy gets, you know, thrown into another dimension and lost forever. Like it usually happens to the people that deserve it. But that show scared me a lot when I was a kid in a way that I loved, you know, and it was, I think it was this idea that like life could just turn on you, you know, like suddenly you're headed one way and there's this twist that you know, this unfair twist. I think one of the ones that terrified me the most, and this is going back to the sound thing, was the one where the lady she gets a phone call like in the middle of the night.
Oh my God, I don't know.
You know which one I'm talking about.
Oh my God.
And
yeah,
there's like
and it's just like this moan.
It's like silent. And she's like, who is this old lady, you know? And she's a widow, and like she's talking and stuff. And later on, she starts hearing like, you know, like, and you think it's like, oh, is this like an obscene phone call or whatever? And then she's like,
I'm
just
getting goosebumps.
leave me alone, you know? And I mean, to ruin the, I mean, you got to watch it. It's like, but it's the sound design that's so terrifying. And then when you find out what the phone call is, it's not only terrifying, but it's also heartbreaking.
Heartbreaking. Exactly.
And you're just like, oh no, you know. So I think that like, but like, what was that lady's character? I don't know. Like, it was just like Twilight Zone just like throws you a character. You know, it's like, here's the swindler, here's the salesman, here's the old widow. You know, like don't think about like their idiosyncratic like, you know, personalities. Just believe it, and then, you know, and then there was a twist. But I think that's scary. And again, like I don't remember a lot of jump scares. I remember a few jump scares in Twilight Zone, but most of the ways you just walk away going, I don't want my twist to come.
Twilight Zone I would put in the category of haunting, right? Like a lot of the stories are very, like, they stick with you because, and it's a little bit of like lesson kind of stuff. And we can talk about some specific episodes in a minute, but yeah, it very rarely like jumps out at you. Terror at 20,000 feet, maybe, right?
Yeah.
Like the gremlin on the wing of the plane, but most of the time it's more like it's just unsettling, you know? Yeah. And like that one in particular that you're talking about, the phone call one, oh, so good, good. And guess what? You can find all these shows on Netflix. You can find them on Pluto.tv. You can find them on YouTube. So it's really easy to find. And yeah, it was the first time I remember as a child where it was like I had a good time being a little uncomfortable. You know?
Yeah.
It was like, oh, wow, I feel weird after watching that. I want to watch another one, and I didn't know why. You know?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was just gonna say my dad told me about that show. And then we went on a trip where it was like we went and stayed at a hotel and it was on, and he was like, "This is the show I was telling you about," and like he had told me of these episodes, and I think it was my first time where I was just like, I really like scary, dark things, like not even scary things, but just like, I mean, again, the aesthetic, and I think the fact that it was shot, I mean, in a time with black and white just helped it so much. Like, I don't think that show would be what it is if it was in color.
Nope. Well, the '80s Twilight Zone proved that.
Yeah.
And the season 3 where they switched to videotaping, that changed things a lot too, and you can feel the difference between when they shot it on film and when they shot it on video, right?
Yeah.
I'd say that like the way it's shot and the medium that it's shot and the fact that it was black and white, and they were working with such in some cases, really rudimentary sets. Like when you think of like the Obsolete Man, like what are the sets in that film?
Right.
But I think that all contributed to what made that tone, the show feel like this kind of surreal landscape that it was like it really was a different place you could transport yourself to. I want to take this as a cue to say that we're going to go to talk about our picks. So like, okay, we talked about how to do it. We talked about why to do it. Where do you go next? Where do you want to take your, like, if you want to study some more examples of excellent usage of, the techniques that we talked about or the ideas that we talked about, we're to go there in about 30 seconds. We're to talk about that with our takeaways. We're each going to pick like 3 scary stories that you can check out today to continue your investigation of this topic. But before we go there, I do want to take this opportunity one more time to say that if you guys enjoyed this show, great thing you can do is you can go to iTunes and give the show a review. You don't have to even write a review. You can just give it however many stars you think the show deserves. If you're watching it on YouTube, giving the video a thumbs up, that helps more people discover the show. That's a very useful way to help spread the word about the show. And also, don't forget, leanintoart.com/workshops, where you can find videos, pay what you want videos from me and Rob, where there's like Comics Fundamentals series, 4 videos where you can learn soup to nuts how to make comics, at least the way I do it, sound design, storytellers UI tools. Rob did this great video series where if he proves that if you are a visual storyteller, you have the tool set to think about user interface design on your website, or making video games from your creator-owned comics. All of these can be found at leanintoart.com/workshops. And then also I want to give a shout-out to Kohl. If you guys think that he did a great job today and contributed to the show in an interesting way, go check out his videos on Vimeo and share some of them. And we will link to those in the show notes as well. Okay. Are we ready to do our picks?
Yes.
Ready as I'm going to be.
I know. Yeah.
Who wants
Rob,
to
you
go
want
first?
to go first?
Okay, sure. One thing that I find it was a big resource, and that started this conversation, hoping to do this episode with Jersey and a guest, was I came across an episode of the Freakonomics Radio podcast, and that I think it's at freakonomics.com, what have you, and it was called Suspense. And they take an economic view on suspense and how it's essentially about optimizing attention. And a lot of the concepts we talked about in this episode resonate with that. I think it's a good resource for probably not like the writing from your gut, but if you're really rationalizing, thinking about setting yourself up to do some kind of creative exploration and a way to sort of measure, are you getting there? I think there's some good things characterized there as far as the general dynamic of how you are trying to reinforce people's beliefs and set them up to then surprise them and put it all of a sudden like go against their beliefs. And anyway, that's a good introduction to that, I think.
Yeah, I listened to it, and it was really good. And yeah, it echoes, and it goes into like a little bit more detail what we were talking about, this notion of like they're in the house, like the call is coming from inside the house. You thought, like you were saying, Kohl, like you thought that the threat was over there. It's actually right next to you, right? Your belief was this before, now it's this, and that surprises and shocks you and upsets you, right? Yeah, we will link to that in the show notes as well.
Mm.
Do you have a favorite scary story, Rob?
Let's see. Favorite scary story. Really tough because it's been a while. I would say the okay. So I think I told the story on Extra Lean a while back, but this I'm just going to pick a video game to dodge the story thing at the moment. It's Five Nights at Freddy's. It does a lot to play with. A lot with the sound design. Holy smokes, Kohl! Have you had a chance to play this game, Five Nights at Freddy's? It's a mobile game. I know it's out on iOS for sure, but I think it's on other platforms. And the premise is, I don't know if you've ever found, like, I think it's common to either have intense love or fear of animatronic animals, or both. And this game plays with that. So the setting is essentially it's in a kind of a worn down pizza joint thing with these animatronic creatures, and you are like you're just starting your job as sort of a night watch person, and you get a lot of instructions via these voicemails or these recordings. And essentially, you have to watch the cameras and sort of, lock the doors at the right time and all this. But it's, oh my gosh, it is very ambient, very creepy, lots of good jump scares. And I played this in the daytime on the bus, and jumped and made a funny sound, being the weird guy on the bus. So anyway,
my students, they cannot stop talking about this game. Like if you're like 12 to 15 right now, like maybe a little bit younger than that, but like yeah, kids right now are like completely gaga for this game. And then I looked at the imagery from it and was like, really? Oh, I guess, yeah. Like when I was that age, I was like all into like Freddy Krueger and stuff too. But yeah, like that bear is freaky looking, man.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost ventriloquist dummy.
Yes.
I will have to check that out.
Yeah.
Five Nights at Freddy's. Kohl, do you have a pick?
Okay. I've been thinking. My picks have changed since we've been talking. I'm going to go with my first pick is a radio show, an old radio play from 1948. Now, I don't want to be pretentiously esoteric, but I really love scary old radio shows because, again, first the sound, but also the I don't know. It's just I feel like it's something we've lost, and it's like walking into an old house that has been abandoned, and you're just like, people used to live here, and people like used to sit and listen to these, and now, like they're like these lost little gems. And so the episode that I am going to talk about, it was for a show called Quiet Please, and the episode is called The Thing on the Forble Board. Forble Board, I think that's a mining term. Forble Board. And it is like, if you look up different, like people talk about their favorite episodes, this one is usually always like some of the best radio horror out there. And it uses a very terrifying sound effect, a voice. It's basically about this guy who he's working on this like oil rig, or something. They're mining, they're drilling, and he kind of starts off slow, and he's like, talking about his friend coming to have pork chops and stuff, and then they find something that's come up from the earth. It's very Lovecraftian.
Oh wow.
And just fantastic for an old scary story. My second one, I want to I don't know. We've talked about a lot of the ones that I really like already. I would say I would probably put the uncle who used to work for Nintendo. It's like, story-wise, if you sit there and you break it down, like it's just like this happened and this happened, and like why is that scary? I'm not sure, but the ambience and the the nostalgia, like somehow this game, and it's free. I should add, it's just online. It's like a browser game, but it's taken nostalgia and like I somehow make like this kind of nostalgic horror out of it. Like it's like I remembered the unsettling feeling of being at somebody's house, and you're supposed to be having fun, and you are having fun, but you're also like, like what, you don't know what's gonna, you know what sets off your dad. You have no clue what's gonna set off that dad, and that kind of thing. I don't know, but it just really played into that. So I would say that was. I'm trying to pick things from different mediums. So radio play and then a game. I would probably say the last one is something that I've discovered this year, and that is Over the Garden Wall on.
Oh my God, yes. Yes,
So
let's talk about that.
it's not super scary. It's got some really scary parts,
Yes.
but it is like the perfect. And the funny thing is, I saw this back in the spring, and I've been recommending it ever since. Now, just to finish, it was a Cartoon Network miniseries that aired last fall, a year ago.
I still need to see this.
Yeah, it's like I think it's like $10 on DVD. It's worth every penny. You can get it on iTunes for about the same amount. It was Brandon Dayton actually who was talking about it on Facebook, and I saw some images from it, and I was like, I think I looked it up on iTunes. It was like $7 or $8. I'm like, oh, this is worth getting sight unseen. So I have a 2.5-year old little girl, and you could probably argue that this would probably be a little too scary. She doesn't get scared of it. She loves it. She calls it work. But I think that I've been recommending it ever since I found it, and some people recently who've seen it were like, "Oh, this is the perfect thing to watch during the season."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Yeah!" Like I saw it in the spring, so I didn't associate it with Halloween, even though it has Halloween, ties. But yeah, it's just like a great. I mean, for me, that's just like. I mean, it's hilarious. It's beautiful. It's touching, and then it's also very scary at moments.
Okay, so I did an episode of the Saturday Supercast with Dave Roman last year, right after it came out, where we watched it, and like I got on the horn with him, like we got to talk about the show, and we did like a full probably 2 hours I think on it. Yeah, and we spent like 40 minutes at the top of it, not spoiling it. But then we go in to start talking about spoilers because there are serious spoilers in it. But one of the things that I was so impressed by with that show is they went back to, and I'm sure you guys experienced this. Like, remember when you read your first like proper fairy tale, or like the real, like an old copy of Wizard of Oz or Alice in Wonderland with the old art in it, and you see what the Wicked Witch looked like, or what the Queen of Hearts looked like in the old books, and it's like, ooh, I don't know how I feel about this. This is uncomfortable. It's not as like smoothly, and it doesn't have the smooth, friendly designs of a Disney. This is like kind of edgy and weird and creepy, and like the Patchwork Girl of Oz, a little bit upsetting looking.
Yeah,
I feel like Over the Garden Wall kind of played with that aesthetic in a really lovely way, and what do I want to say, like played with your expectations, like we were talking about, but subverted them. You think it's this, but it's that. And I think of the Anti-Whisper episode, right?
Yeah,
where you think it's this, but it's actually that. And then when you go back and watch it again, you're like, oh my God, they laid it down straight for me. They never lied to me.
Right.
The misdirection happened. It happened at the very beginning of the episode, and I never saw it coming. And so it rewards you for repeat watching,
Right.
And then also how it does this wonderful thing with like scariness and monsters, where it's like, sometimes the thing that looks scary is actually the thing that can help you, and sometimes the thing that looks beautiful is actually quite scary. So in other words, don't take anything for granted, and you always have to have your wits about you.
Right.
Right. Like, remember when they go to the pumpkin town where there's like all those people with the pumpkin heads, and it's really eerie, and then they're digging that hole, and you're like, what are they digging? What are they digging?
Yeah.
And then like it would get like really scary, like, oh my God, we're digging graves. Oh, we're not actually digging graves, we're digging this, and it's actually a good thing. Oh, but it's actually scary. Oh, but it's actually okay.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah, it was so great. It's like the three, like, every year I'm like towards the end of the year I'm like, what are the amazing things that I discovered this year? And like Over the Garden Wall, it was like the first one. I loved that it was like it built into that kind of, Nathaniel Hawthorne like fall New England creepiness that's also beautiful, and like you want it to, you're unsettled, but you also want to just like let it, like I would love to live in a world where it's fall the whole time. Like fall's like, it's beautiful, and but it's also dying. Maybe this is why I like cemeteries, like this, the beauty of dying. I don't know, but I felt like it just really brought together like so many things, like, Wizard of Oz is a very American thing, but like this was even more American, like it was, and with the music and the.
Yeah.
But yes, I think it's just a really wonderful Halloween.
Yeah.
Show.
I mean, it's not explicitly a Halloween show, but like, and you got to watch it to see what I'm talking about. But it gets a little bit more explicit. But I do feel like it's like destined to be a Halloween classic.
Yeah.
Because of like the tone and everything you described. But it is without a doubt one of the finest cartoons produced in the last 15 years, in my opinion. It's just wonderful, absolutely wonderful. And I envy people who haven't seen it yet because you get to watch it for the first time.
I know. Like I said, I have seen that. My little girl loves that show, and so we have watched it. I have probably watched it 15 times, and it's just like every time I'm just like, this show is so brilliant and so wonderful, and deals with that aesthetic that is just so creepy and wonderful and beautiful, and I love it.
And there's not a drop of fat on it too. That's the other really amazing thing. Is like even the very first thing you see in the whole series is this hand picking up a rock.
Right.
Which seems like it looks like it's going to add up to a throwaway gag later on, but then at the end.
Yeah, like you forget all those images
Yeah.
that you in the beginning. You forget. So if you watch it again, you're like, they showed me that?
Yeah. Yeah.
I saw it right there.
It's that good.
Yeah.
Rob, I would say it's probably there are parts where I think it would get a little too scary for Kaya.
Yeah, I mean, every kid's mileage may vary. Some are, more sensitive and whatnot. I'll definitely watch it on my own.
Yeah.
And super look forward to it. I will find a way to get that done in the next couple days because I've just heard too much good about it. So let's move on so we don't spoil anything from it.
Yeah, thank you. Because probably Kohl and I could probably like do another episode of the Saturday Supercast about this show.
Yeah, which is super cool, and I think. Yeah.
Thank you for keeping
excellent sales job.
Joseph Coco is in the chat saying Among the Sleep is a creepy baby first person horror game. So there's another recommendation to add to the notes.
Yikes.
And then I would just reiterate for one of my picks is the Twilight Zone, because the Twilight Zone is one of those amazing shows where they can end it in an ambiguous way where it's not clear that it's going to end well for everybody, right? Like I think of The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street, right? Where it ends with everybody trying to kill each other, and then it pans back and you get like the true truth of the story. Episodes like The Invaders. Do you remember the one with there's no dialogue in it and it's all done with sound?
That one's scary.
That one's really scary. And like you look at the props, they're not great. Like it's this woman in this house and there's these little creepy astronauts like trying to break in. And they're like the size of like, maybe like 7 inches, 8 inches tall. And there's no dialogue. It's all just done with sound. It's an amazing, amazing show. Nick of Time. Nick of Time is William Shatner feeling imprisoned by a fortune-telling napkin dispenser, and there's no physical threat in it. The threat is he going to submit himself to this what appears to be a possessed napkin dispenser, right?
Yeah. Back when I used to teach, but in the very small window that I was teaching, I would often have my students. I would always say I'd show them Twilight Zones because they're you can show them, and I would just always say look how tight the writing is, look how many locations and actors they're using, very minimal, and it was just good writing, and I mean not every episode's great, but overall it's just like a masterpiece.
Yeah, I've heard many people say that it's the greatest television show ever made, and I kind of have a hard time debating that. I mean, it's really a masterful television series. It's really good. Even the video episodes are not that bad.
Right.
But yeah, we do need to wrap this one up.
Yeah, I know we're running a bit long.
This is what happens when Kohl and I get together. But
guys, I
do have a third pick to squeeze in too.
All the other episodes I've done. This is
well, we have actually we worked on trying to trim down a bit, and you know what, it's all go with the flow, and this is the natural length of this episode. It's as long as it needs to be. But one quick pick because I didn't do three. I'm just gonna say it's an older anime called Witch Hunter Robin.
Oh yeah, I did.
And Yeah, really good ambience, fun feel. It's nowhere like, oh, it's the level of storytelling that Twilight Zone is or what have you. But it's a very fun series. It's getting in the eyes of sort of essentially a young witch hunter that gets brought into a team to hunt witches and uncovering the mysteries of overall throughout what that. I think it's just a one season thing, but yeah, they do a great job with the threats of the. I suppose it's throwing in the supernatural angle, which we didn't really hit that much as far as horror, but it's more that flavor of what if there were magic, and what if people who weren't kind with that power, what if they're doing stuff with it, and how would you stop them, that kind of thing.
Witch Hunter Robin.
Yeah, it's a great series.
Well, I will link to it in the show notes. And then, not a pick, but more like for more listening on this topic, I wanted to make sure that I let the leaners know that I started a new storytelling show with my friends Zach Giolongo and Ben Hatke. Ben Hatke of Zeta the Space Girl, Zach Giolongo of Broxo and Ewok Shadows of Endor. We got together and we actually did a talk on the topic of monsters and searching for the monster you need for your stories. And that can be found at comicsaregreat.com/GOSA, G-O-S-A, because the name of the show is Galaxy of Super Adventure. 10 points if you know the reference. But you can follow us on Twitter at Gosatron, which is the little robot that you see riding the dragon there on our album art, who is sort of like the announcer of the show. But yeah.
Awesome.
Check that out. That's going to be a regularly updating show with the three of us. And people have heard Zach on the show before. He's terrific.
It's good stuff. I totally recommend it. I'm partway through. I just downloaded the first episode today, and you guys are a lot of fun, and you talk about monsters. So what else is there to say? But download it.
Yes. Thank you for that iTunes review, Rob. They're a lot of fun. They talk about monsters. What else you got? Okay, well, hey, Kohl, thank you so much for this terrific conversation and lending so much to the discussion. If you want, if people were to express their gratitude to you, what is the one place you'd want them to go today to check out your stuff?
Yeah, if you look me up, Kohl Glass on Vimeo, you can definitely check out all my stuff. Twitter is where I do most of my social networking, but I also have a Facebook. You can follow my professional kind of movements at writer-director Kohl Glass on Facebook, but I'd probably say Vimeo if you want to check my stuff out.
All right. Well, we'll link to that in the show notes as well. But yeah, we got to have you back for more of this. This was great, Kohl. Always fun to talk with you.
Oh, it's always fun to be on.
All right, this show will be archived at leanintoart.com, and there's going to be a whole bunch of call-outs to where to find more about us in the exit music. But thanks, everybody, for downloading, watching, and listening. Until next time, I have been Jersey Drozd of leanintoart.com and Jersey on Twitter.
And I've been Rob Stenzinger of leanintoart.com and Rob Stenzinger on Twitter.
And this is the part where I say, okay, bye.
Show notes for this episode can be found at leanintoart.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at the user leanintoart, and you can reach us via email at leanintoart@gmail.com. And remember, leaners aren't wieners. Thanks for listening.
All right, guys, I'm going to kill the stream. Thanks, everybody, for watching.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.